Hello again, my friends. Welcome to the Fat Man's revisitation and review of various whatevers. In this particular case, I'm continuing my review of the Ultimate Equipment Guide. Like I said before, it's the details that make some games more interesting than others, and a lot of things will come up over the years as a GM. You'll get players who want to go and say, "My character, I want this for my character. I want that device for my character," and for the most part, a lot of this stuff is nickel and dime stuff. It's the advantages for having them are slight, but that extra 2 points modifier for a roll could be the difference between success and failure in a given endeavor or task or skill check. Correct? Excuse me. Now, it's kind of appropriate. It's Christmas. It's Christmas Eve morning. It's cold here in Iowa. We've got our first serious snowfall out here on the ground. It's still falling, about an inch out there. Uh, may or may not aware that I reside in an RV. This is because situations in my personal life have caused that to happen, and so we have to take precautions, even in the fact that we do have a rolling home, to that we deal with the weather, which is typical of what we don't see a lot of in a lot of role playing games. GM's campaign wise. Now, I'm not going to say this for all of you, but a good chunk of you have to do a wink and nod at the environment and traveling through the wilderness. It's because it's not as exciting or glamorous or adventurous as fighting down a dragon or something like that. On the other hand, I am one of those people who believe that this is a part of the adventurer's life, and that encounters do not always require something to be myrtleized or vandalized or sliced and diced, and not necessarily have to be living, breathing, or undead or what have you. That just getting through something from point A to point B can be a challenge in and of itself. Having spent some time in the wilderness, having been a little bit of a hunting in my youth, done a lot of camping in my lifetime, a lot of over the road biking, that kind of stuff. Uh, there's a lot of good things to know and a lot of necessary things for the would-be player character to have to be overcome as a challenge. And these are encounters. Success or failure doesn't matter. Experience is gained through encounters. Correct? Okay. This particular chapter is called Into the Wild, which, as it says, is full of stuff, equipment that your characters might not necessarily utilize in the wilderness or would like to have, or in some cases might have to improvise on the fly if you put them in that scenario. Now, cold weather. This is one of those things that a good 20% of the adventuring world for most people involves cold climes. That means characters are going to be adventuring in the dead of winter or have to go into the highlands or up into the mountains or perhaps out into a glacier or into the depths where a frozen glacier exists and need to know how to equip their characters appropriately so they don't freeze to death. And if you're a mechanic based game master, if you really choose to follow the basic premise of all the rules, that includes this sort of thing. And having regular fortitude checks can make the difference between whether the campaign is going to be successful or not. Because if the characters start dying from fatigue or from exposure or from frostbite or from freezing to death, well, they weren't properly prepared. They didn't make that effort. They didn't take that chance. Now, as a GM, of course, it's your job to make it obvious to them that they need to do so. So, if their adventure takes them into a highland village and have everybody dressed in warm clothes, fires going everywhere, make occasional comments about, well, I wouldn't go up into the Nikanaki Pass without taking a whatever. So, that aspect, having a large selection of equipment for this mindset is a good thing, and it offers you another outlet for your players to unload stuff, to purchase equipment, and spend their cold with without maintaining huge hordes of freelance cash on hand. The other advantages to this sort of stuff is the variety of flavor that it adds to your given campaign, whether it be in the desert, in the swamp, in the forest, or in the mountains. All of it has its own requirements, nature wise, survival wise. And of course, traditionally, most game systems are heavily magic based, which means we have a lot of ways to circumvent a lot of basic stuff of that nature. But I'm of the opinion that that's a cheat. Okay, I grant you that the spellcaster and the priest both have spells that protect them from the elements, and that's an awesome thing. But guess what? If you're doing this appropriate, that's something they have to do on a daily basis. That means burning up a slot or using up a prayer, whatever you want to call it. So that's one less offensive option they have available to them. And if they have to extend this to the rest of their party, you got 4 people in your party or 5 people in your party, and your wizard has to cast protection from elements 5 times. Think about how much he's just burned up for the day. And then we got your livestock. If you got accompanying animals and horses, whatever, guard dogs, that kind of stuff, they all are affected by the environment too. So you need to take preparations for them. And if you're going to use that magical means to protect them, then what does that mean? Once again, more magical outlay towards protecting these critters from the elements. Now, if you've got a party of 5 plus 5 horses and a pack horse, now there's 11 spell casts required every day, every 24-hour period, based off of the basic spell of protection from the elements. And yes, there's some that will say, well, I can do a group protect. Okay, now what happens if it gets nullified? Some other magically inclined whatever comes along and fires off a dispel magic spell at everybody. Suddenly you're all out there freezing your tootsies off because what? You're running around in a loincloth in the middle of the highland winter? Yeah. Okay. So there's so much stuff in this particular chapter. I really can't go through everything and have this run into a half hour. And I'm trying to avoid those because I know everybody's attention span's I've already burned past that just in my introduction. But we have some basic things, and we have a lot of common sense stuff that you would, ideally look to find. I can tell you, over the years, I've had issues with some things because somebody will come up, even as a player, I wanted a certain thing, and we never could find the basic rules for it. So we had to house rule it. We had to create the concept ourselves, determine what it would do, what it required, blah, blah, blah. The simple backpack, for example. They call it a pack in the DM guide, and some of the older D&D versions don't tell you what it holds. They just tell you what it is and how much it costs. This book actually has an appendix in the back that says, okay, the average backpack holds 1 cubic foot of it, whatever. All right, and then there's a variety of backpacks. So things like a winter blanket. Well, what does it do? Well, in this case, they also fall short on that, I think. But the common sense says so. So in this case, it just is a thick woolen blanket. Winter blanket, 5 silver pieces, weighs 3 pounds, and I would add to that it's a negative or a +2 circumstance roll towards dealing with the environment. So if you're wrapped in your woolen blanket, and you need to make a fortitude roll against the cold, it's a +2 addition to it. While some things stack, some things don't stack. So you have to, as the GM, either follow the rules on that line of thinking, or make some obvious decisions. So, there's a reason we don't let everything stack. The same reason we don't like minimum max on a lot of situations. Because I can keep putting on magical items, and I can add spells, and I can add devices, and then suddenly I've got a +20 to my roll for dealing with exposure checks to the cold. So I got a +20 to my fortitude. I'm going to always make it unless I get an utter fail. As long as you allow the other fail, there's that one chance in 20 or whatever that they're going to have some exposure damage because they screwed up. Well, we have, like I said, in here we got the Abba, which is a series of robes that are designed for wearing in the desert. A lot of desert people use them, and they don't crop up in too often in the game material. They also it's just like clothing in general. We do a nod and a brush when it comes to clothing, and I noticed in later years, a lot of the equipment guides that come out in the back of the core books and stuff, or the handbooks, tell you basically a kit. Here's your adventurer's kit. Well, this, I have mixed opinions on that. I've always preferred the originality of allowing the players to buy various items of clothing and dressing themselves appropriately. So, than having a kit. But hey, it is what it is. So we got the animal snare backpacks, got antifungal ointment, bird calls, blood decoys, blanket and hood for the horse. Going back to, like I said, you can't just protect your character. Got to protect his horse too. A body pack, a backpack that's worn on this body. Then we got some stuff that kind of technically bridges. Yes, it's a wilderness survival item, but it also sees uses in other ways. Well, here's a clever one that I know once or twice has cropped up is the bladed boot. Boot has the blades that pop out, right? And here the concept basically is the device that the guys use to climb trees with. So it actually shows now, having seen loggers, I know that the logging cleats that they use to climb actually point down along their ankles so they get support into the tree and not out through the front toe of the boot, like the picture shows. The picture shows the boot with the blade sticking out the front. So in reality, that's a poor design. It's hard on the ankles, hard on the blade because it makes the blade going to bend like this, which means there's putting all that pressure on that point. So, let's be honest, this thing belongs in the rogue section because it's a hidden weapon that you could learn to master and attack people with, either being rogues or maybe in the monks or something like that, whatever. A breathing bag for breathing underwater, a brick press. You need to create bricks, and if you got time to build yourself a proper shelter, this is a device you might want to have in your bag of holding. They also have a interesting twist on this. This is not an item that I ever considered until I read about it in here as being something you would find as a wilderness kit. But you can take this brick press and, given time, take all your animal waste and compress them into compact bricks of fuel that you can then carry along with you into an environment where you can't find a lot of natural stuff to burn and have your fire. It is what it is. Camouflage tarps, canoes of various types, chalk, climbers kits, cold weather outfits, a compass, desert kits, dowsing rod, dwarven pie, elven wafers, earth's blood, fire seed. Now, fire seed. That is something, if you watch some of the survival shows that have been popular over the past 5-10 years, you'll know that the concept here is we take an ember from the fire from the night before, and we wrap it up in certain type of tinder and padding, and then stick it into a device, preferably something that's going to be moisture proof without smothering it completely. And the idea being is the ender will continue to smolder for up to several days. So then when you move to your next campsite, you don't have to make as many efforts to get your fire going. Now, traditionally, most people as game masters and players then just brush over that. Well, I got a magic user, the cantrip, the light, lit the fire. Okay, well, that's the use of a spell, in my opinion. If you're using, this traditional flint and tinder, most of the times we don't make a roll for it. We just say your success. I, on the other hand, will, if the weather's severe enough, if you're in a heavy rain or in a heavy snowstorm, will make you make that's an encounter to me. I will make the characters make those skill checks to get their fire going. If you don't, then you're going to have those negatives that you got to deal with, in addition to your regular problems for dealing with the weather. So, something to keep in mind. At least if you play like I like to play. Fishing nets, forest blind, glowing harness, glow powder, grappling hooks, halfling bread, hunting horn, hunter's outfit, hunting knives, uh, small horn. Okay, hunting knives for a minute. I've had discussions with many players over the years, and for the longest time, you couldn't get a knife. You couldn't get the stats on it. You had to buy a dagger, especially in the old D&D books. They didn't include things like a knife. Matter of fact, I think the first time I saw a reference to an actual, what you consider a hunting knife or a kitchen knife, was in a supplement for Forgotten Realms. And for Faerun, I'm not sure which one it is. I know I have it somewhere in storage, but it uh, was the first time we had a stat for that kind of item. And there is a distinct difference between a hunting knife, a table knife, and a dagger. Daggers are actually a very short sword. You want to make that an argument. They're thicker. They're combat blades. Today it would be the equivalent. A dagger is the equivalent of K-bar. A military combat knife that you can use in the field to cut your meat and to do other things. But in reality, as for a cooking utensil, a dagger is a very poor choice of an item. On the other hand, hunting knives and stuff as a weapon are a poor choice, but are still considered a weapon if you need them in a pinch. Traditionally, it would fall under that using an item that's untrained or whatever, so you get a -2, I think it is, for applying them. But in this case, it's a set. So you've got small knives for cleaning, preparing kill for meals rather than fighting in the wilderness, replete with boning, skinning, and other delicate knives. These blades are well crafted and provide a significant benefit for game hunters. Blah, blah. Each set of knives includes 6 different blades for a variety of dressing purposes. Using a complete set of hunting knives confers a +2 competence bonus to all craft, i.e. dress animal checks. Now, I will acknowledge that I don't think I've ever asked a player to make a check to see if they successfully butchered a deer or a bear or whatever it is that they decide they want to eat. I have made characters make a similar check if they're trying to harvest an item from an exotic creature that they intend to sell or utilize as a spell component. So, but that falls under, there's some rules and some mechanics for that here and there, but that's something to consider. Ice boots, insect repellent, jungle kits, rope ladders, leash, a machete. That's another item like the hunting knives that have come up many times. I've had a lot of players. I want a machete. I want a machete. Well, okay. Well, in this case, they actually give the stats: a medium-sized, simple weapon. Damage is 1d6, critical times 2. Its range is 0, and weighs 5 pounds, and is a slashing weapon. So this is something you got to be literally in somebody's grill to use, and so on. Mountain kit, mountaineers outfits, preserving packing board, batons, preserving kit, rucksack, sighting glass, signal whistle, skates, skis, snow guards, snowshoes, sounding drum. There's water shoes in here too somewhere. Snowshoes. On several different game encounters over the years, I've had players that were in heavily winter environments in their campaign, and snowshoes cropped up on a couple occasions, and we didn't have any stats for them. We had to house modifier, kit bash our own, so everybody would have it. So in this case, make it ease of traveling over snow, which means they don't have to, using snowshoes means they don't make the penalties that you would for having to try to wade through snow that's knee deep and stuff, slowing you down. On the other hand, it does, according to this, that's greatly improving the ease of travel over snow. A character wearing snowshoes will only suffer a 50% movement penalty when traveling over deep snow. So you're only slowed by half. A tourniquet, traveler stocks, travois, tree net, i.e. a hammock, thick furs, water pack, water trap, weather gauge, whale skin suit, a whale straw. Now, a water trap. That is an item that I've had a couple players at least come up with the concept over the years and we had to once again ad lib because we didn't have a set of rules for them. I knew what they were. I understood what the principle behind them was, so I could. And this is back before we had Google. You know, you have a lot of advantages today we didn't have 20, 30 years ago, when you can just, what the hell is this thing? Let's check it on. Let me Google it and see what it comes up, so we can get a better idea of what we're looking at, what we're trying to achieve. So in the case of the water trap. I would have players that say, well, we're in the deep desert. We need to get moisture. We need to get water. Let's make it this. Or the issue is always the same: fresh, drinkable, potable water. And that's an item that you take for granted. Most players and GMs don't bog down in that kind of a detail. But for a fun twist, once in a while, throwing that cork at somebody can break for an interesting afternoon. One of the challenges, and I do not care what environment you're in, is having a fresh supply of water. You know, we can go for a long time without food. We can't go for very long without water. 3, 4 days at the most before there's a serious, serious problem. So when we mean I'm out in the wilderness, I'm in the forest, well, I should be able to find water. I beg to differ. I've been in the forest. I've been hiking through the woods, and finding potable water on a regular basis is not necessarily as common as people think. You know, you don't have a stream every 25 feet. You could go miles between creeks. It is what it is. And if you add that to a humid environment in a hilly terrain full of trees, you're exhausting yourself climbing up and down these hills and through this sweltering, smoggy, thick environment, and get thirsty fast. And then you have to find the local stream. And if you're brave enough to drink out of it, because then there's that other thing, is the water safe? We don't take that into account in our gameplay too much, but it is what it is, and it is a challenge to consider, right? So there you go, under 30 minutes. Into the wild: equipment for survival, for everyday needs, and basic needs for characters adventuring beyond the local farmlands in the city. Keep in mind, there's a lot of opportunities for adventure and challenges and encounters that don't involve pulling a knife, or throwing an axe, or drawing a bowstring.